Just don't F me up.
Okay, welcome back to the shit show.
So,
Start out with a little scatting, maybe.
Yes. I was validated once and now I will never stop.
I am glad. I love it. I'm
Thank
here
you.
for it.
Thank you. We are Just Don't F Them Up, a podcast by two moms who are also therapists who don't know what they're doing. So we started a podcast to ask experts in the field so we don't feel so scared every day, all day.
You need help.
It's going well so far.
So far, I'm loving it.
Loving it. We are joined today by Nicole Pierce-Risvold, and she is a licensed professional clinical counselor and a licensed professional school counselor, K through 12. She has experience working for 14 years with middle schoolers.
That was the drum roll.
Beautiful.
It's amazing.
Amazing. 14 years at any job is incredible.
Yeah. But 14 years with middle schoolers. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Tell us, Nicole, what is your secret?
I love that intro. That was awesome. And 14 years, yeah, sometimes it feels crazy because I feel like it didn't feel that long. And as you guys know, is when you enter the field, you're a baby and you're in the field doing counseling and therapy and you're like, should I be with your children? Who's trusting me doing this job? But so much yeah, right. But so much goodness happens because I feel like, as cliche as it might sound, you're growing with these middle schoolers, your talents, and they're also developing theirs. And so a lot of magic can happen, especially with I think with middle schoolers, of just kind of meeting them where they're at and allowing them space to just be themselves. So I always think about what is, the secret sauce of middle school? And I feel like that question, is asked a lot by parents, by folks like yourself, or just people when you're having, drinks with someone and you're like, yeah, I used to work with middle schoolers. Like, what? Like, stop, pump the brakes. Why would you choose that? And I'm like, okay, well, the thing with them is they're looking to connect. They're looking to figure out who they are. They're looking to be validated, like a lot of us are. And they do it in very strange ways. But, slowing that down and kind of weeding through those strange ways they do it in can be really powerful and really, really awesome.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps
it's a good reminder too. Like it is, I even think about some of that with I know I don't have middle schoolers yet, but my oldest acts like a middle schooler, and just remembering he's just figuring out how to connect and how to express himself and how to I don't know, get through the day just like we are. And even though sometimes it's really irritating to me, I have to just take a step back and he's trying to figure it out too.
Absolutely.
I love what you said earlier about it's not attention seeking, it's connection seeking. Can you explain more about what that means?
Yeah. So, I know that when a middle schooler, right? So kind of for definition's sake, we're talking probably 11-year-olds through 14, maybe 15 if they're a little older for their grade, right? Are looking to connect with you. They often do it in behavioral ways at times, especially when they're irritated, frustrated, their bio needs aren't being met, right? They'll do it through really awkward and weird ways, right? And they'll want to seek connection maybe through kind of like we were talking about earlier, but maybe swearing or trying to be cool or doing really irritable things, deliberately, in our eyes, deliberately disrespecting or saying no and not doing something or doing the opposite. that's when we kind of are, that's a big clue, right? That connection is lacking somewhere in their life, right? It might not be with us. It might be with school, with friends, with other people. It could be the fact that they're just not feeling connected to themselves, right? Something that's totally not about you, right? They're figuring out who they are. I always want people to think back of like, we all had those times when we were alone in our rooms and we're like, how awkward is my body? What did I, when we were in middle school, we replayed some conversation that we had, or somebody, said something to us that made us feel bad. All of that's super intensified when you're an adolescent, right? Your brain is just under so much construction that it's going, wow, all of these things seem really threatening, right? Us adults, when those awkward things happen, we can kind of talk ourselves into more regulation, and they can't, right? So when they're dysregulated, they act in just very strange ways, to say it nicely. And they'll do it through also just trying to get your attention in poor or difficult ways. And usually at the times of the day when you're not regulated yourself, right? Think about end of the day, 5:30, 6 o'clock, probably the worst time of the day, quote unquote, for a parent, right? Difficult time of the day. And your teenager's coming home and they're like not helping you. They're, doing things or talking back to you. Like that is them feeling just like disconnected, right? At times, like they're also trying to kind of code switch from being at school all day to now being back at home and interacting with the family. And so sometimes those areas are worth exploring, right? And a lot of times as parents, or even educators, I think about when I was an educator, we would do, when those things would present, we'd be like, well, what's wrong? Or why are you doing this? A lot of why, or just kind of interrogative type questioning, I call it, versus, waiting to come back later, right? And talking about what we experienced, what was going on for them, letting some of that ride out, right? Like if they are a little unruly, saying challenging or hurtful things, not saying we're ever going to dismiss it, but trying to regulate them in the moment when they're trying to get connection isn't going to work.
As you're talking about this, it makes me think about what is a common theme in previous episodes too, is that like our own traumas really get triggered up by, and I could totally see that playing out with middle schoolers who, if we have a trauma where we felt unheard as a kid, and now we have middle schoolers who just won't listen, that is going to be really difficult to cope with in the moment and try to remember that this is connection seeking. That they're not trying to disrespect us or disobey us.
Even on a little kid scale, like when they're doing some of these things, I'm like, my God, go over. But that's like the exact opposite of what they're trying to get, and they just don't know how to say it.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie to you. As you were talking, a part of me felt like I might be a middle schooler.
I almost laughed because I was like, yeah, totally. When I was in middle school, I was in my room thinking about how awkward my body is. Stuff out, like replaying conversations from earlier in the day to like think about how awkward I sounded. That was totally in middle school, not now as an adult. Not at all.
Totally grown out of that.
Well, I love that you say that, because I think that's like ways that we get connections with kids, right? Is, obviously we all know like connecting on interest is fun and it's awesome. Like I remember I always used to love to talk about Taylor Swift with kids because she's my favorite. And like I used to love to talk to kids about just like fun music or cool things happening in the community. And those are fun things. And they don't require a ton of probably vulnerability, right? But what was always really interesting for kids to hear was just like, yeah, I don't have my shit together either, like, and half of the adults in the school, or maybe all of them, don't either. That doesn't mean we don't care about you. We're not perfect. Doesn't mean we can't keep you safe. But, I still feel anxious some days. I still feel self-conscious. I still get into some difficult conflict with my friends too, right? Because I think a lot of times some kids don't really hear that or see that sometimes from the adults in their life. And that's not Not saying that there's a fault in parenting for that. Sometimes we do obviously try to present to our kids that we've got it all together. But hearing about some of those things from the lens of, oh, at your, not from the lens of, oh, at your age, this happened. It's not a big deal. You'll get over it. Versus, this happened to me too as a middle schooler. It was really hard. I can still remember the feelings. I can still remember the situation. And here's some things that I did, and it's your choice if you want to maybe explore those things, or what ideas do you have, in solving that problem. And sometimes reminding them that, like, you're not looking for a specific outcome, right? Some of those things, like, you're just looking for them to, try something. And if they're willing to kind of report back or willing to continue to conversate with you about it, that would be welcomed.
It's lovely.
That's really interesting. I like that a lot because I feel like the outcome thing is something that like a lot of us probably fall into. We're going to try this because we have to get whatever. We have to have our mornings be less stressful. It's so horrible in the mornings or whatever it might be, right? Like, so I think just the like, okay, let's just try this and see what you notice is probably a lot more inviting for kids rather than like, okay, do this to get this result.
Yeah, I wonder too, like, you're describing, I mean, something that we'd like to do with everyone in our life, like friends, just like making a space for them and, being gentle. And what would you say to parents of middle schoolers or about to become middle schoolers? Like, how can parents support this age group?
Yeah. $1 million question, right? I
Fix
would say
everything.
fix everything. Well, first of all, I think in that, is that there are going to be parts of this that are going to be natural and normal, when it comes to just this age group, right? So the things that certain things are gonna be unavoidable. So if you can work with yourself, knowing that, like, no matter if you have, um, a boy or girl or non-binary or however your child identifies, they're gonna have probably drama in their life, right? And being okay with that, right? And not prescribing, oh, that only happens to this gender or whatever. Like, drama's gonna happen, uncomfortable friendship situations are gonna happen. They're gonna go through it, and that's all super normal and healthy. And so kind of cultivating that mindset that, like, we are gonna have problems, we're gonna have a lot of problems. And that's gonna be okay. It's about how I stick with my child and let them know, like, I'm not jumping out of the boat. I'm gonna be with you and I'm gonna like kind of paddle this boat with you. Can be a big deal, right? And even when our child does something that's like kind of egregious or something really maybe embarrassing to you, the family, or just whatever, knowing that it is not the end of the world. A lot of things are repairable. Something so cool about this age group is that a lot of kids forgive and they don't care as much as we think they care, right? So, like, for example, it's not saying that we want to like tell our kids they can do whatever they want, it's going to be fine. But at the same time, right, like a lot of times when kids feel supported and they do things, they're worried about, sometimes our worry rather is that like their peers are going to like make this name and reputation for them. Well, sure, reputations get formed if same behaviors are repeated over and over again. But here or there, something that happens that was a mistake, and if they take ownership for it, kids are very forgiving, right? And so I think that's something that we can think about when we worry about if our kids are going to get along with others or fit in, or how they're going to navigate middle school. And then for us, knowing too as parents that when they do something at home, that this is temporary, it's not forever, that your frustrations with them can be solved. This is figure outable, can be really helpful, especially telling a child that, okay, there's nothing that we can't figure out together. Let's come up with some solutions, and I need you to go first, right? Because that's also part of teaching them some discipline and accountability. Like, let's say you did something at school. What are 3 solutions that you think you could take tomorrow, right? And again, back to that, like, we're not in charge of the outcome, they are. So how can we help guide them? Obviously, help them kind of vet out those solutions, circle back. A lot of times that circling back, you're like, God damn it, that was not a, I don't know if I love that you did that. But, like keep holding them through that and kind of keep holding them, in that situation and helping them. That can be really helpful too, is that having this like mindset that a lot of these things we can figure out together, and they do have the power to really make some good and strong choices if we kind of allow that space. And that space can be grueling, it can be hard, and it can be kind of long, but we'll get there.
I think that's so awesome though, and it comes back around so nicely to connection. Like when there's something going on, when they're mouthing off, or when they're like being disrespectful, or they're cranky, or whatever, they're seeking connection, right? And even just the phrase of like, there's nothing that we can't figure out together. Like we will figure this out together. Like that's so just like connecting and calming. Like even when you said that, I was like, yeah, we get it. We're gonna figure this out. Like that's really like such a good reminder for them. Like we're on the same team. We don't have to like fight against each other. Like we'll get it somehow.
Mm. I was noticing that too. Like I feel somewhat encouraged about this stage of my children's lives, which is, I think, because middle school is probably the hardest for me. I've been really dreading that and thinking like, how can I build my children's emotional IQ so that middle school stings less? And just hearing you say like, just accept that like there's gonna be drama, because they're just a bunch of hormonal preteens. There's gonna be drama, and I have this like fix it mentality. Like I do it at work all day, so then I take it home with me. And I've been hearing in a lot of these interviews of like, don't do the hand holding thing. Don't, just make a safe space to hear them out and maybe help them come up with problem solving ideas, but it's not yours to take care of. It was lovely to hear that part too.
Yeah, it makes me think of what we talked about with in one of our previous interviews, but having the bumpers up, right? Like there's bumpers, so we can guide them a little bit, but mostly let them do it within the bumpers. And like that, I feel like as parents takes so much pressure off. I don't have to figure this all out. I don't have to come up with all the problem solving. I don't have to figure out how to get you to follow through with the problem solving that I come up with. It's like, no, you kind of have to be the driver of it. You kind of have to lead us through it, and we'll be here to help you as much as we can along the way. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah, this is going to be hard.
I just want to take care of it and like be done with it.
Yeah.
When you say it's really hard, I agree with that. It is really hard sometimes to not be attached to outcomes, and especially, folks like ourselves who are therapists, or if your partners work in any type of positions that are like, a lot of our work is solution focused. It's solving, it's generating outcomes or whatever. That can be really hard. So it kind of makes me think about when I would talk to parents about like, what can we do at home? Can we do to just really support ourselves through this? I think two things that usually come to mind is find your group of middle school, parents, like a co-op of parents, right? I think it's so interesting to me. Like we've all had littles, right? Or I still have littles right now. Like there's such a, like people meet through ECFE and have little kid play groups and play dates, and moms and dads and whoever become friends, parents become friends. And that's so great. And then as we get into middle school, we stop, doing some of those check-ins, or we stop, some of that kind of group mentality around, right? Because we're not necessarily trying to meet at the park and wear off steam till nap time. But at the same time, we're still trying to accomplish big goals with our kids, right? And like you said, it's about trying to develop their EQ and IQ and making them, well-rounded individuals. But it's also, something that still needs to be present is that co-op of people, right? So middle school group chats with other parents can be really helpful. I found that that started to kind of happen during COVID times, where people would get together and they were chatting about things, especially about academics and how to navigate distance learning. And some of it dropped off just by natural ways of the world once we got back to in-person learning. But people would share with me like, oh gosh, I wish that we would still do that. I wish we were still having this group chat or these checks with one another. Like we were really in survivor mindsets, right? During lockdowns and stuff. But like a lot of times we are still in survival mode when we have sometimes, when times are tough with our middle schoolers or when times are tough with any age level, right? We get into survivor mode. So, when we are in survival mode, who are the people that we can talk to? Who's our group chat? Who's our co-op? I think that can be really helpful for parents to feel like they have a source to go to. And obviously, just someone who's going to say like, it's going to be okay, or here's what I tried, or here's suggestion, or if anything, I'm just here to validate you. I don't have the answers, but I'm validating you that this sounds really incredibly tough.
I feel like that what you just said is literally why we decided to start a podcast, is because it's like there's so much stuff that happens that our thought process was, even as therapists, we're licensed therapists who work with people on trauma and emotions and all of the things all day, every day. And we're still like, I don't know what to do with this. I think that I screwed this up. My kid is going to be screwed up forever because I did this and I said this. And like, it's all just like, what do we do? And so I love that suggestion of having a community and having people that you can just be like, here's what happened today. So that was really fun.
Yeah, taking us ourselves out of the isolation, because if we're in community, our stuff might be less likely to be triggered or come up too. If we're feeling grounded in support with people who know what it's like, fantastic. It's one of those things where like we think about it to prescribe to other people, but don't think about it for ourselves.
100%.
Yeah.
I say it to people all the time, but then when it comes to me, I text you, Mackenzie. I think I did something wrong here.
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever texted you back and been like, you're right. You're horrible.
For sure.
You said something that's been sticking with me, Nicole, since you said it. There's even the popular kids have struggles. And I remember thinking in middle school and even my adult self looking back at me like, oh, it would have been so nice. That was so healing to hear that no matter what your class level in the middle school hierarchy of popularity, you are going to have drama and maybe some trauma.
Yeah, I found that like the drama and the academic problems or behavior problems didn't discriminate, right? From popular to students who were maybe more isolated or didn't have a very great social network. The similar problems would crop up in all different walks of life within that student population. And so I think sometimes that can be hard I think what was sometimes hard for certain types of parents was if they navigated life fairly well in middle school or felt like they had a good friendship circle and didn't really go through these things. They felt so at loss about what their kids were going through, and which is understandable. They felt like they didn't have any tools or resources. But that, is one of those things where we have to kind of move from our experience, whether it was good or bad in middle school, and look at it through their lens of like, what is their experience and what are they going through? And that's always an interesting conversation to have with parents. Like, I understand that, like, at home, you're not yelling, you're not like this way or that way, and your kid is doing it at school, or they're being mean, or they're saying hurtful things to peers, and that's not the way you talk at home, or it's not the way that you experienced your life. Um, okay, well, here we are, you know,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Meaning, like, it's not okay about the behavior, but reminding ourselves it's okay that this event is happening because we're gonna get through it. So tell me, you know, kind of what's going on, what's happening for you, right? And it makes me think about a lot about how, you know, you're saying that, like, you're, you know, you had this preconceived notion of like what was going on for your peers, and you were thinking that everybody's life is, we usually think as middle schoolers, everybody's life is a little bit better than ours. You know, middle schoolers still think that, you know, they're like, so and so, you know, I went to their house and it's bigger, they have their own room or whatever, and their parents are nicer, and we just have that black and white thinking. So I think too, you know, reminding parents, brain is under so much construction. They're thinking black and white a lot. They're thinking, especially when they're approaching problems, right? They're not thinking, you know, from a broad scale, right? They're in their downstairs brain, as we know that term, when it comes to things, as we are too when we have issues. So, what do you usually need to get back upstairs, right? Your teen probably needs that too. Um, and something that I like think is so great about middle schoolers when it comes, and I think I said this already, when it comes to solving problems, they have such a great capacity for moving on. And so when they have moved on, I think it's really important for us to move on too. Because I think well-meaning parents will be like, okay, you still having problems with Sabrina? Are you still like, and it's like, we're over that, right? So just kind of knowing that, like, if we create this culture of connection, our kids are going to come to us with things. We likely don't have to pry. And that's a skill that, like, is a skill that we have to, I think, learn pretty early on when it comes to navigating teens, is that well-meaning parents, yes, we can circle back, but we can't pry, because a lot of times we're giving kids messages at times that, like, this should still be a problem, or maybe we're worried that's a problem and therefore we don't really trust they have maybe the skill sets to handle it.
Oh.
Um,
Oh,
yeah,
because
this is going to be even harder because I'm constantly like, "What's wrong? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What happened today?" And my boys especially are like, "Nothing. It's fine, nothing." And I'm like, "But you said there was this thing, and so like, is that still a thing? Is that still going on?" And they get so irritated with me.
yes, I needed to hear that too because it is prying. But what I'm thinking is like, oh, I'm trying to show you that this is a safe space and that I'm interested in what you want to talk about. And
That I care about you.
yeah, but to them, it is prying, and it is like if I'm just modeling making a safe space, they'll come to me when they're ready. Question mark.
Dot, dot,
I
dot.
think so. I think so. You know what's interesting too, and I don't want to get into gender roles or stereotypes. I really want to preface that and be really careful about that. But something I learned in 14 years is that dads have kind of a magical power with just sitting with kids. Um, Kids, we always asked, me and my three other, I worked on a team of, there was three of us, three middle school counselors, and we each had a grade level, 6 through 8, and we looped with our kids, right? So we moved with them, and so I'd have the same kids, 6th through 8th grade. Each year we asked them a question: who in your house can you go to, and what do you go to them for, right? Whether whoever they lived with, right? And because we, as we know, kids live with a lot of different types of adults. We always said, who are the adults? It seemed like um, when they had an adult male in their life that sometimes they had a good relationship with, and they seemed to want to go to them because they could just sit with the problem, right? And again, I don't want to stereotype women about anything, but we would always look at that. We were data-driven counselors. We always collected data about our students, and we always were asking good questions. And they're like, yeah, like, for example, right? A lot of kids would say, who maybe came from a mom and dad household, would say, my dad, you know, can just sit in the car and not ask me all these questions. He just is kind of like talks to me, and then before I know it, I feel comfortable telling him that I failed my math test today, or I feel comfortable telling him something, because if it was my mom, she's gonna pull the car over, or she's gonna be like, we get to the destination and she's gonna maybe start crying. And again, those things aren't negative, perhaps, right? Those are reactions that we have as human beings, but it was always extremely interesting. So we always took that information and we always said, well, let's just use that information for what it's worth. It probably doesn't matter, mom or dad, who can sit with the kid the longest, right? And maybe dads just possess that skill set to sometimes just sit with kids. I don't know. I'm not sure, right? But it was so interesting and fascinating to me that they would tend to tell frightening information to the adults in their life that kind of remained calm and silent with them and had nonchalant conversations on really bad days.
I can't get my mouth to close right now. I'm so just like flabbergasted by all of this. Like, I need to shut the hell up.
You gotta chew your beef, babe.
I gotta chew the beef.
I am still processing perhaps what you have just shared with us. And it is, I think you might have just saved my marriage.
Literally so many places I can use this. Like, and it is the exact opposite of my nature and everything that happens inside of, like, and our whole entire jobs, right? Like, people come to therapy and they don't want us to just be like, well, and just wait for them. Like, but our families want that. That's what you're saying. Like, our kids.
Well, I think I also kind of realized, and you guys, this won't be a surprise to you as therapists, I think it's the nervous system regulation that they can feel, right? With that regulated adult. Like, and again, for whatever reason, perhaps the kids that I had in those years had regulated, and not saying moms were dysregulated, but moms, we don't have to break it down. We're carrying the mental load. We've got the energy. We're doing 1,000 things at once. Sometimes dads just are not. So therefore, maybe they have the capacity for it. But then when we think about leveraging, it doesn't matter if you have a mom and dad household, 2 moms, 2 dads, whatever your household looks like. I think the for me, the information was, let's regulate. If we can't both regulate, who's going to be regulated with the teens, right? Because the teens feel it. I think a lot of kids feel it, but the teens especially, those middle schoolers, like, who can just go for a drive with the kiddo, or who can just be somewhere in the home, hanging out, doing something, feeling like they don't have to multitask. And sometimes I can't be moms, right? Like, I feel like I'm in my daughter's room playing, and then I'm also like, probably on my phone trying to charge my private client and maybe take a note, and then I'm playing, and then I'm putting a diaper on, and I don't know, like, right? Like, so sometimes that just happens. So no matter what parent type of household you have or adult household you have who are caretaking, let's think about regulation and knowing that it's not always possible for everybody to be regulated, but if our teen is struggling, who can sit with the teen that's regulated?
Yep. That's the part I think perhaps for parents to consider is, I mean, what you're describing about like the what is that word? Stereotypical mom role. Like, I am that person. I'm always doing shit.
Mm-hmm.
When you're describing the other parenting role where maybe they're not holding as much and they're able to just sit with it, that sounds pretty idealistic. And I don't know if I have the nervous system to get there someday. I am working on it. Is it possible for there to be benefit from parents having more equity in the relationship, so both parents have the opportunity to be the calm, regulated, safe space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think about that a lot as a parent myself and as a clinician, is just like, when we can figure out how to have equity and fair play, right, in the home, like, how much better can we parent, right? So I also think it's super important for teenage years, for when we start becoming like taxis and chauffeurs, and when we have a million places to get our teens to, that we think about that, right? I always like how Brené Brown says, like, you should show up and ask your partner, what do you have today? Like, and it has to equal 100, right? And you're like, I've got 80, I've got 20. And some days you're both going to show up and you're like, we both have 10. So we both have to just be kind, right? And I was just thinking about that a lot in parenting. I also think about that when I would work with teenagers too, of just like, it's an exhausting emotional role. So even if you can't show up and give your teen everything, and can you just be kind? Because I think that gets hard with teenagers, because we do kind of sometimes, even really educated people, right? Even those of us who really care about child development, sometimes we parentify kids a little bit, especially when we're having like maybe some discord with our partner, because all of us have discord with our partners, right? Or conflict with our partners, and so we'll just be like, well, you should be able to help out around here with the littles, or you should be able to keep your room clean and stuff like that. And not saying we can't say those things to our kids ever, but knowing that, like, when are we saying those when we're at 10%, or do we have the bandwidth? Are we at 80 or above to actually have that conversation and have it with kindness and have it with some directness and some like good stuff to polish it off? Or are we just shooting those things off from the hip when we're at 10%? I think those things are interesting conversations to have with our partners as well.
Yes, and model that for our kids too. Model that this is okay to do in a relationship, because you're a team.
Mm-hmm.
Delicious.
It's hard. So hard. Maybe I'm tired today. Maybe I'm at 10 today. Like, these are all genius ideas, and I'm exhausted just thinking about trying to do this today.
Yeah, practical application.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A little bit at a time. A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. I think it is a little at a time, right? So when we talk about folks who might have, things in their home, that was always a big conversation I had with families, is like, we've got to fix academics, got to fix social stuff. They're doing this. Like, okay, we are not going to get 20 assignments turned in probably a month. Okay. So let's just wait a little bit. Let's do whatever comes home in the backpack tonight, or on the iPad, wherever you live, your schoolwork lives, or we're being mean to everybody. Okay. Well, let's just figure out who is it that we need to kind of address, right? It doesn't mean you don't care about those other aspects, but you are not a magician when you're with middle schoolers. You are simply not. So that can be such a powerful conversation to have with yourself, your partner, educational team, if you're working with, people in the school. But if your teen is struggling, is that, like, it's got to be super, super small, bite-sized, steps. So yeah, because that can be really exhausting. That's what happens, and right, and then everybody throws their hands up in the air, and they're like, "We can't do this," and then they send them to therapy, and then expect the therapist to fix them, or they expect the school to fix them. And the biggest magic, right? And again, I know this, as we know, happens in the home, right? It does happen in the home, and like that can also be really daunting and feel really heavy, that we are, responsible for a lot of our kids, but the same time, if we can have some things in the home happen, it's at a small rate and some small changes, things will shift in the community, and they'll shift in school too. So yeah, back to that kind of beginning theme, what we talked about is that connection piece. So how am I connecting with my kiddo? And sometimes it's with less words and presence and holding space for them.
I was saying to Mackenzie, I don't remember if we recorded it or if it was just a conversation we were having, but this is making me think of that. Like, I'm trying really hard to just take one thing from each of these conversations we're having with all these different people, because we're learning so much, but I'm trying to implement one thing. And I think the thing that I'm going to work on is, like, not over talking, over interrogating, over asking. Like, I'm trying to just be like like there, a calm presence, and give them more autonomy with coming to me for stuff. Even though I want to ask 72,000 questions
Yeah.
in rapid fire as soon
Yeah.
as I get to my car at the end of the day.
Right. I think about that too. Like, there's not a lot of transition time in between roles, and like,
Mhm.
how dysregulated am I showing up when I have a day of clients and I need to figure out a way to transition. And this might be true for anybody with any job. Like, maybe your drive home is your transition, or you go for a walk outside and that's your transition, so that you are more regulated and present, and just let that be the magic. Just like stop working so hard.
I am upset. Stop working so hard.
Right. It's so funny. I always want to hear that. I want people to be like, you need to do less work. But then when it's said, I'm like, how?
I can't.
hmm
Hmm. But I think we can.
I think I can too. Someday. And I think that
Question mark.
probably it is likely that my nervous system has the ability to land more in my window of tolerance more often if perhaps I pay more attention to thine self.
Mm.
So,
Shouldn't- Never heard that before, right?
this is the first time you're rocking schemas, Nicole. And you have you're so calm and like this wealth of knowledge. I feel so grounded as you talk about the scariest thing I've ever talking about out loud with other humans.
Hmm.
And I don't think, like, I mean, I just noticing like so much gratitude to you. Just like your calm presence as you're talking about the reality of the situation. It's like it's not good or bad. It just is, and it's okay. And I think eventually my voice will come down an octave to its normal range. But right now, I feel so. That's okay. Nicole said it's gonna be fine, so that's fine.
She said, and literally, this is probably a large, well, I mean, a sizable portion of why you were able to work with these kids and their families for so long is because of the presence and because of this. Just like, yeah, this. I mean, we'll figure it out. We'll get there. Like, there's lots of assignments, but like, we're not gonna get them all done this month or probably next month, but we'll get there.
Well, I appreciate it. Yes. And it was a lot of fun and a lot of work. And I think that, it came with a lot of thinking about that development, right? The developmental piece, right? Sometimes I would frame it for myself or still frame it, for parents or others at middle schoolers. I moved into a neighborhood in the last year. There's a lot of like kind of middle schoolers. And so sometimes we'll just chat in the alley. We have alleyway chats about kids. And I was like, sometimes it's looking at it like how we looked at our kids in that first year of life, right? It was normal and expected for them to have blowouts and poop their pants up to the back. It was normal and expected for them to not sleep through the night, and it was normal and expected, right? And we met a lot of that with like, oh, it's okay, like not saying it didn't suck, right? It absolutely does suck at times, but we would just be like, that's normal, right? Another mom told me that was normal. Let's do that too with middle schoolers. Like, it's normal, and there are certainly for sure things that are not normal. But trust yourself. You're going to know that. Just like you knew that about your kiddos. If something went wrong, you knew when to bring them to urgent care. You knew when to tap into another specialist. You'll know that with your middle schoolers, right? When something might not be quite right, you wouldn't deny them the help they need. But some of these other things that are just difficult and hard, are part of that development, that brain development. They have to go through that, right? And we know with some research now that the kids who actually did have healthy conflict and parents didn't save them, or people didn't come in and scoop them away from conflict, are way better at, as we know when we work with adults, navigating that in life, because somebody in middle school years wasn't like, well, let me solve that for you, and here's exactly what you should say to your friend. It was like, well, come up with some ideas. Let's talk about that, right? Like, what could you say? Maybe they'll go back and they'll swear at their friend and say something wrong, but that's a lesson, right? They're
Yeah.
figuring this out, you know? So, yeah, that analogy has always kind of helped for me. Is a lot of this is developmentally appropriate.
We keep hearing that too.
Mm-hmm.
We keep hearing so much about being aware of the developmental stage your child is in and using that to kind of guide your parenting.
And I think too, our developmental stage as parents, because I've never done this before, and each new stage for them is a new stage for us, and we're going through it too. Like, when you were saying, like, maybe they go and swear at them and make things worse, like, but then they learn from that. I do that all the time, and I may repeat that behavior a few times before I learn a solid lesson. But I think having that patience with ourselves also, like understanding where they are and that it's normal, and also for us, because we're brand new at it and we've not done it before either.
Mm-hmm.
This
Yeah.
has been awesome.
So
Thank you so much for sharing your
wealth of knowledge.
all of the stuff.
Thank you for leaving me so grounded for the rest of my day.
Thank you guys for having fun with this topic. I think it's always really great to talk about these things and just be candid and fun about it. And so I really appreciate you guys providing this platform for folks to just think about these things in kind of realistic terms, you know? So I think that's always so positive. Sometimes there's so much information about like, do this, say this, like prescribed conversations, when sometimes we need to have these off the cuff kind of conversations. So I really appreciate it.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you. Thank you so much for everything.
Love
Absolutely.
it. All right. Well, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say we tend to have really long goodbyes at the end of our episodes because we're like, no, you're great. No, you're great. No, you're great. And I appreciate you. No, you hang up. No, you hang up.
Minnesota goodbyes, right?
Real.
Yeah. So we'll just email you 5 times after this so you really know
So you get all the goodbye.
how much
Love it.
you mean to us.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who's listening. And if you like our podcast, could you please give us a rating and or review, or both? That would be great. You could share us on your social. You could do any of that to help us reach more parents.
That's right. And shout out to our listeners in Germany and Cyprus. We see you. We appreciate you.
We know you're out there.
We don't know who you are, but we know you're out there.
Yep. All right. Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.